Hey everyone, welcome to section 7.4, question 15. So in this question, we're going to be considering PepsiCo, and they've given us some information. Looks like it's their past dividend pattern. So as of 2000, or beginning with 2000 up until the most current dividend payout, which was in 2010, we have that information. We also know the price of the stock is $66.78. So one thing we can definitely figure out based off of this information is the dividend growth rate. After we figure that out, next step is trying to figure out the required rate of return for the stock. And again, we're going to assume that the future dividend growth rate remain the same and the company has an infinite time horizon. Once we calculate those two numbers, we'll discuss whether or not the return is reasonable. So back to our first step, which is step one, and that's figuring out the growth rate, or in other words, we're solving for G. Now, we have a formula to solve for G, and we'll put it right here, okay? But we also can solve with our spreadsheet, so we'll do both and we'll compare. So we need to know our present value, our future value, present value. We also need to know the number of changes to the dividend, or the number of dividends minus 1. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But in terms of future value, now we're looking at these numbers here. So if you consider the future value, again, imagine this as a timeline. Our future value is our most recent dividend payment. Okay, so we've also seen this expressed as dividend 0. Okay, so therefore a 2010 value 1.89. Now our present value, if this is our most recent, then this is going to be our least recent, or otherwise is our first dividend payment. Okay, so the first dividend payment paid out. So that would be in 2000, and again we have, we have a 2000 payout of 55 cents, give or take. Now in terms of the number of periods, we have to recall that we're looking at the number of period changes. So if you actually counted it out, there'd be 11 dividends. Okay, but the amount of changes, there's actually only 10. So if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there's actually 10 dividend changes. Or you can calculate it by 11 dividends, which is there minus 1. So either way, we're down to 10 number of periods. Okay. So once we have those variables, we can use, and again, in this case, we're solving for G, but in terms of our function, again, it's just another rate that we're solving for. So NPR, there are no payments. We're simply comparing the present value and the future value. So our present value, now again, one of these, either the present value or the future value, needs to be negative. So I'm going to make the present value negative, and our future value will be positive. And that's all we need to input. And we have it nicely rounded to decimal places. Okay, so that's 13.4%. Now let's take a look at the formula that we could use mathematically. So we'll break it down. So first is going to be our future value divided by our present value. Okay, so that's what we have in the bracket here. Now we need to raise it to the power of 1 divided by n. Okay, so that's the number of changes. And then we're going to subtract 1 from that value. And we should, if we put it in the same format, we should see that, yes. So we have two identical numbers, so that's looking good. Let's see what happens when we punch it in here. Wonderful. And we can get rid of this now. So we figured out G. Okay, now we need to estimate the annual required return for PepsiCo stock. Now, remember that we are assuming the future dividend growth rate remain the same. So in other words, it's a constant growth rate, and the company has an infinite time horizon. Okay, so those two characters hopefully will remind us of a model that we've discussed previously. Okay, and that's Gordon's model. So that's what we use when we're looking at a constant infinite horizon. Okay, that's how we solve for price. So let's just clarify. So now we're into step 2. Okay, so now in this case we have the price of the stock. Okay, but what are we actually trying to solve for? Well, we're trying to solve for R, the required rate of return. So we have to rearrange this. Okay, now we pretend we did some algebra classes and we rearranged the formula. And here we are. We've rearranged it. Oh, nope, sorry, that's the wrong formula. We've already used that formula. Okay, and we rearranged it to have R all isolated by itself. Okay, so imagine we multiply both sides by R minus G, got rid of this denominator. We would have R minus G here. Then we divided both sides by price, right? So then that would cancel. Price would be down here. Then we'd be left with R minus G. Now if we added G to both sides, we would be left with R, and we would add G here. So we'd be left with this, okay? I'm just going to move this away just so we don't get confused, okay? So we're going to use this formula to solve for R. Okay, so simply, sometimes it's not that simple in Excel, but we'll see how it goes. So dividend 0, okay, well that's dividend 0. Again, it's the most recent dividend, so we've already, we understand that's the future value of the most recent dividend payout. Then we have to add 1 plus G, okay, so G is what we just calculated. Okay, we're going to divide the bottom or the denominator by our price. So the price has been given to us, so 66.78, okay, and we just need to add our G again, okay, so our growth rate. So we go ahead and do that. Okay, wonderful, it's been formatted for us. Okay, so it looks like our rate is 16.24%, which looks good, and we'll discuss why that looks good in just a second. Okay, looks good. So now the final question is it reasonable? Okay, now I'm going to pull this up again, and just by looking at Gordon's model, hopefully we'll remind ourselves something. Okay, I'm going to say yes because of, well, the main reason is that R is greater than G. Okay, so if you go back to Gordon's model, again, we're predicting the future price of our stock, of the price of the company. If we look, if R is greater than G, that's wonderful, because that means that we're going to have the forecasted value is going to continue growing. Okay, now if the rate of return was less than G, less than the growth rate, then that's not going to be good, because then we're going to have a negative price, and that's going to be problematic. So in this case, yes, it is reasonable. So whenever you're assessing whether it's reasonable, make sure to take a look at, is R greater than G? And if it is, then most likely it's going to be reasonable. So let's check that out. Wonderful. Okay, thanks for watching, and happy financing.